The weight of expectations. Jackson Pierce stood in his corner office on the 42nd floor of the Transamerica Pyramid, staring at the San Francisco Bay stretching before him like a sheet of hammered silver. At 34, he had built Pierce Technologies from a garage startup into a company worth $500 million. He had everything that mattered in Silicon Valley: innovation, influence, and more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. What he did not have was the one thing his family cared about most. "Jackson, darling, you cannot show up alone again." His mother's voice echoed in his mind from their lunch meeting just hours earlier. Margaret Pierce had perfected the art of making suggestions that were really commands. "Your grandfather is turning 85. This gala is important to him. Important to the family name? Every notable family in California will be there, and you will be the only one without a companion. Again." He had tried explaining that his work left little time for relationships, that the women in his social circle only saw dollar signs when they looked at him, that he was tired of the game, the pretense, the constant evaluation of whether someone wanted him or wanted his wealth. His mother had dismissed each excuse with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "Then find someone suitable and make it work," she had said, as if love were a business transaction that could be negotiated with the right terms. Jackson turned from the window, picked up his phone. An idea had been forming since that conversation, an idea both desperate and potentially brilliant. He opened his browser and typed, "Professional actresses for hire, San Francisco." A chance encounter 3 days later. Jackson sat in a small theater in the Mission District, watching a woman transform herself on stage. The play was contemporary, experimental, the kind of production that played to audiences of 30 people rather than 300. But the actress in the lead role commanded attention as if she were performing at the Met, Natalie Brooks moved across the stage with a grace that seemed both practiced and natural. Her character was a working-class woman fighting against a system designed to keep her down. Every gesture, every word, every moment of silence rang with truth. When she delivered her final monologue, tears streaming down her face as she chose dignity over survival, Jackson found himself leaning forward. Forgetting why he had come, the applause was enthusiastic, but brief. Only 27 people filled the seats. As the cast took their bows, Jackson noticed how Natalie's smile seemed tired behind her stage makeup, how her eyes scanned the audience as if counting how many had shown up, how she held herself with pride despite performing in a theater that smelled of mildew and broken dreams. He waited until the small crowd dispersed, then approached the stage door. A young man with a clipboard stopped him. "Can I help you?" "I would like to speak with Natalie Brooks if she is available. My name is Jackson Pierce." The man's eyes widened slightly at the name. Even in the art world, money talked. "Let me check." 5 minutes later, Natalie emerged in jeans and a simple sweater, her stage makeup removed, revealing a face more interesting than beautiful. She had strong features, intelligent brown eyes, and an expression of cautious curiosity. "Mr. Pierce, I'm Natalie Brooks. Tommy said you wanted to speak with me?" Her voice was clear, confident, with just a trace of a Brooklyn accent she probably worked hard to hide on stage. "Thank you for seeing me. Your performance tonight was remarkable. Thank you." She waited, clearly wondering what a tech billionaire wanted with a struggling actress. Jackson glanced around the empty lobby. "Is there somewhere we could talk privately? I have a proposition that might interest you." The proposal. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks from the theater. Natalie held her coffee cup with both hands, listening as Jackson explained his situation with a directness that surprised even him. "So let me make sure I understand," she said slowly. "You want to hire me to pretend to be your fiancée for one night? At your grandfather's gala? In front of 300 of San Francisco's elite? For $40,000. Correct. Why me?" Jackson had prepared for this question. "I watched you perform tonight. You were completely convincing as someone from a different world, a different life. You made the audience believe every word, every emotion. That is exactly what I need." Natalie set down her coffee. "Mr. Pierce, I appreciate the offer, but I'm an actress, not an escort." "I am not asking you to be an escort," Jackson said quickly. "This is purely professional. You would arrive with me, stay by my side during the event, play the role of my fiancé, and leave when it ends. Nothing more. There would be a contract specifying exactly what is and is not expected, and what happens after. When people ask about me, when your family wants to see me again, we will have broken up, mutually, amicably. It happens all the time. Natalie studied him, and Jackson felt uncomfortably exposed under her gaze. She had the actress's gift for seeing beneath surfaces. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "You are successful, reasonably attractive, certainly wealthy enough to date anyone you want. Why hire a fake fiancé instead of just bringing a real date?" Jackson looked away, watching the barista make drinks for the late-night crowd. "Because everyone I meet wants something from me. My mother wants me married to increase the family's social standing. The women in my social circle want either my money or my connections. My business associates want me paired with someone who enhances my image. Nobody just wants me. You think I will be different because you are paying me? I think you will be different because we will both know exactly what this is. A transaction. A performance. No pretense that it is anything more." Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Jackson could see her thinking, weighing, calculating. He wondered what her financial situation was like. The theater had been nearly empty on a Friday night. Small productions like that rarely paid enough to live on. $40,000, she said finally. "Half up front?" "Yes, and this gala is in 2 weeks." "Correct. Which means we would need to spend time together beforehand. Creating our story, learning about each other's lives, rehearsing. I would expect you to commit several hours over the next 10 days to make it convincing." "Exactly." Natalie picked up her coffee again, taking a slow sip. Jackson found himself holding his breath, surprised by how much he wanted her to say yes. It was not just about the gala anymore. Something about her directness, her intelligence, the way she looked at him like he was just a person rather than a bank account, made him want to know her better. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them. First, everything in writing. Contract, specifying exactly what is expected. Payment terms. Confidentiality agreements. I want legal protection for both of us." "Agreed. I will have my attorney draw something up. Second, I need to know everything about your family, your life, your business. If I'm going to play your fiancé, I cannot be caught not knowing basic facts. We will create a complete backstory, and I will brief you on everyone who will be at the gala." Third, Natalie leaned forward, her eyes serious. "If at any point I feel uncomfortable or unsafe, the deal is off, and you still pay me the full amount." Jackson met her gaze steadily. "Agreed, but I promise you, Natalie, I have no intention of making you uncomfortable. This is a performance, nothing more." She studied him for another long moment, then extended her hand. "All right, Jackson Pierce. You have yourself a fake fiancé." As their hands met, Jackson felt something unexpected, a spark of connection that had nothing to do with business arrangements or contracted performances. He released her hand quickly, reminding himself that this was just a transaction. "We'll have my attorney send the contract tomorrow," he said, pulling a card from his wallet. "My personal number is on there. Once you have signed, we can begin preparations." Natalie took the card, turning it over in her fingers. "One more question." "Yes." "What happens if we are too convincing? What if people actually believe we are in love?" Jackson smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Then we will have done our jobs perfectly. That is the whole point." What he did not say, what he could not admit even to himself, was that he was already wondering the same thing. As he watched Natalie walk back toward the theater, her figure disappearing into the San Francisco night, Jackson had the unsettling feeling that he had just set something in motion that he would not be able to control. The city lights sparkled around him, beautiful and cold, just like the world he lived in. In 2 weeks, he would walk into his grandfather's gala with a woman on his arm who was there only because he was paying her. It should have felt like victory, like he had solved his problem with typical efficiency. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something far more complicated than he had ever imagined. Creating the illusion, the contract arrived via courier. The next morning, delivered to the small apartment Natalie shared with 2 other actresses in the Tenderloin, 27 pages of legal language that essentially boiled down to pretend to love Jackson Pierce for one night, tell no one the truth, receive $40,000. She signed it with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was agreeing to. 2 days later, Natalie stood outside a gleaming high-rise in the financial district, checking the address Jackson had sent. The doorman greeted her by name, which meant Jackson had already informed the building staff. She rode the elevator to the penthouse, watching the floor numbers climb while her stomach performed its own nervous acrobatics. Jackson opened the door, wearing jeans and a navy sweater, looking more relaxed than he had at the coffee shop. His apartment was exactly what she expected, floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic city views. Minimalist furniture, expensive art on the walls, but something felt off. It took her a moment to realize what it was. Despite its luxury, the space felt unlived in, like a hotel suite rather than a home. "Thank you for coming," Jackson said, gesturing for her to enter. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Water?" "Water would be great." Natalie set her bag down, pulling out a notebook she had bought specifically for this project. "So, where do we start?" "The beginning, I suppose." Jackson handed her a glass of sparkling water. "We need to create a believable story of how we met and fell in love." They settled on the sectional sofa, and for the next 3 hours, they constructed their fictional relationship like architects designing a building. Every detail mattered, every moment needed to withstand scrutiny. "We met 4 months ago at a charity benefit for the arts," Jackson suggested. "You were there because your theater company was receiving a grant." "I was there because my company was a major donor," Natalie wrote quickly, her theatrical training making her approach this like character development. "You saw me across the room. I was wearing a green dress, looking uncomfortable in the fancy setting. You brought me a glass of champagne and made a joke about the pretentious sculpture by the bar." "What sculpture?" Jackson asked, leaning closer to read her notes. "Does it matter? We are making this up." But Natalie smiled, appreciating his attention to detail. "Fine." It was a twisted metal thing that was supposed to represent the human struggle. "You said it looked like a bicycle accident." Jackson laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. "I like that. Very me. The point is, you made me laugh when I was ready to leave. We talked for 2 hours about art, about why you got into technology, about my dream of running my own theater company someday. You asked for my number? I almost did not give it to you. Why not?" Natalie looked up from her notebook. "Because you were clearly wealthy, and I thought you were just collecting phone numbers for sport. But you were persistent. You texted me the next day asking if I wanted to get coffee. Not dinner at some expensive restaurant, just coffee." "I like that," Jackson said quietly. "It sounds like something I actually would do." "Good. The best lies are the ones closest to truth." They continued building their history, layering in details that made their relationship feel real. First dates, favorite restaurants, inside jokes, the moment Jackson supposedly realized he was in love. With each addition, Natalie found herself studying Jackson more carefully, noticing things she had missed before. The way he listened intently when she spoke, how he absently rubbed his left wrist when he was thinking, the sadness that flickered in his eyes when he mentioned his late father. "Tell me about your family," Natalie said. "If I am meeting them, I need to know what I am walking into." Jackson's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "My grandfather Theodore is the patriarch. He built Pierce Industries from nothing, turned it into a real estate empire. He is tough but fair, and honestly the only family member whose opinion I care about. He is the reason I am doing this, because you do not want to disappoint him, because I do not want him to spend his 85th birthday worrying about me being alone." Natalie made notes, moved by the genuine affection in Jackson's voice. "And your mother?" "Margaret Pierce. Born into old money, married my father to combine 2 fortunes. She is elegant, proper, and believes the world operates according to a very specific set of rules. Rules that include appropriate marriages to appropriate people? Let me guess. Theater actresses from Brooklyn do not qualify as appropriate." Jackson met her eyes. "No, they do not." which is why we need to make sure you seem more than appropriate. You need to seem perfect. Transformation the next week passed in a blur of preparation. Jackson hired a stylist who took Natalie to boutiques she had only window shopped before. She stood in dressing rooms while women who cost more per hour than she made in a week brought her designer dresses to try on.
"This one," the stylist said,
holding up a midnight blue gown that seemed to shimmer in the light. Simple, elegant, sophisticated. It says, "You belong without trying too hard." Natalie tried it on, barely recognizing herself in the mirror. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, the fabric flowing like water when she moved. It was beautiful. It was also $12,000. "I cannot wear this," she said. "If I spill something on it, I would owe more than my rent for a year." "You will not spill anything," Jackson said from outside the dressing room. "May I see?" Natalie stepped out, suddenly self-conscious. Jackson had been answering emails on his phone, but looked up when she appeared. The expression on his face made her breath catch. "You look stunning," he said quietly. "It is just a dress." "No." He stood, walking closer. "It is not just a dress. You look like you were born to wear it. Like you belong in rooms where dresses like this are normal." Natalie turned back to the mirror, seeing what he saw. With her hair styled and minimal makeup, she did look different. Not fake, but polished. The girl from Brooklyn was still there in her eyes, in the set of her jaw, but she could pass in his world. At least for one night. "We'll take it," Jackson told the stylist, then to Natalie. "And shoes, jewelry, whatever else she needs." That evening, back in Jackson's apartment, they rehearsed their physical interactions. How he would place his hand on her back when guiding her through a room. How she would adjust his tie before photos. The small, intimate gestures that couples performed without thinking. "May I?" Jackson asked, extending his hand. Natalie took it, and he pulled her closer until only inches separated them. This close, she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, feel the warmth radiating from his body. "At events like this, we will need to dance," he said, his voice slightly rough. "My mother always insists on at least one waltz. I've never waltzed at a high society gala before. Just follow my lead." Jackson placed one hand on her waist, holding her other hand in his, and began to move. Natalie stumbled at first, stepping on his feet, but he was patient, guiding her through the steps until she found the rhythm. His apartment had a sound system, and soft classical music filled the space as they practiced. "You are a natural," Jackson said as they turned smoothly across his living room floor. "I am an actress. I can fake anything. Is that what this feels like? Faking?" Natalie looked up at him, and the question hung between them, loaded with meanings neither was ready to explore. "Yes," she lied. "Just performance." But it did not feel like performance. It felt dangerously real, the way his hands spread across her back, warm and possessive. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. The way her heart raced when he pulled her closer during a turn. "We should stop," Natalie said, pulling away. "I think I have the dancing figured out." Jackson released her immediately, but something had shifted in the air between them. Something neither the contract nor their carefully constructed lies had accounted for. The gala night, the night of the gala, arrived with fog rolling in from the bay, wrapping San Francisco in its ghostly embrace. Jackson picked Natalie up at 6, driving himself rather than sending a car. When she opened her apartment door, his sharp intake of breath told her everything. "You look incredible," he managed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Natalie smiled, taking in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "Ready to lie to 300 people? With you? I think I am ready for anything." The venue was the Legion of Honor. The neoclassical museum perched above the ocean with views that made even jaded San Franciscans pause. Luxury cars lined the circular drive, depositing guests in gowns and tuxedos. Natalie felt her confidence waver as they approached. Jackson must have sensed it because he took her hand, squeezing gently. "Remember, you belong here. You are talented, intelligent, and beautiful. Anyone who thinks otherwise is wrong, even your mother. Especially my mother." They entered together, and Natalie felt the weight of curious stares immediately. She recognized some faces from magazines and news articles, tech executives, politicians, old money families whose names graced museum wings and hospital buildings. And they were all looking at her, wondering who had captured Jackson Pierce's attention. A woman in red approached, her smile bright but predatory. Finally decided to join the civilized world and bring a date? Clarissa. Jackson's tone was carefully neutral. Natalie, this is Clarissa Whitmore. We dated briefly years ago. Clarissa, this is Natalie Brooks, my fiancée. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Clarissa's smile froze, her eyes scanning Natalie from head to toe in frank assessment. Fiancée? How unexpected. I do not remember seeing an announcement. We are keeping it quiet until after grandfather's birthday, Jackson explained smoothly. Did not want to steal his spotlight. How considerate. Clarissa's tone suggested it was anything but. And what do you do, Natalie? I am an actress. Theater, primarily. How charming. Like a hobby, like a career, Natalie corrected, keeping her voice pleasant but firm. I have spent 10 years training and performing. Currently, I am with the Mission Arts Collective. I have never heard of it. Perhaps you should broaden your cultural horizons. Jackson coughed to cover a laugh. Clarissa's smile tightened further before she excused herself, gliding away to spread the news to anyone who would listen. That was perfect, Jackson whispered. You just made an enemy of one of San Francisco's biggest gossips, which means everyone will know about you within the hour. Is that good or bad? With you? Definitely good. Come on, time to meet my mother. Meeting Margaret Pierce held court near the sculpture garden, surrounded by women who looked like they had stepped from the pages of a society magazine. When Jackson approached with Natalie, the conversation died instantly. Mother, Jackson said, kissing her cheek, I would like you to meet Natalie Brooks. Margaret turned the full force of her attention on Natalie, and it felt like being examined under a microscope. Everything about her was evaluated in seconds. Dress, posture, makeup, jewelry, the way she held Jackson's hand. Hey, Miss Brooks. Jackson mentioned he was bringing someone. How long have you known my son? For months, though it feels like longer. Jackson has a way of making time feel different. Jackson mentioned you work in theater? Yes, I am an actress. Interesting. What have I seen you in? It was a trap, and they both knew it. Margaret Pierce would never set foot in the small theaters where Natalie performed. Probably nothing. I work primarily in intimate theater productions, small audiences, experimental work. Not exactly mainstream entertainment, but fulfilling. I imagine. Very. There is something powerful about affecting 30 people deeply rather than entertaining 300 superficially. Margaret's eyebrow lifted slightly. It might have been approval. It might have been offense. And your family? What do they think of your career choice? My parents encouraged me to follow my passion. My father worked hard to provide for our family, and my mother taught me that dignity matters more than status. They are proud of who I have become. How lovely. Margaret's tone suggested it was anything but. Jackson, your grandfather is asking for you. He is in the main gallery. As they walked away, Jackson leaned close. That went better than expected. She only used her cutting voice twice. Is that good? With my mother? That is practically a warm embrace. The truth surfaces, the evening progressed smoothly. Natalie met countless people, spinning their rehearsed story with practiced ease. She laughed at appropriate moments, asked intelligent questions, and most importantly, looked at Jackson with exactly the right amount of affection. Not too much, which would seem fake, but enough to convince. Theodore Pierce was the highlight. The elderly man sat in a wheelchair now, but his mind remained sharp as ever. When Jackson introduced Natalie, his eyes twinkled with something that looked like knowing amusement. So you are the woman who finally caught my grandson's attention, Theodore said, taking Natalie's hand in his papery one. Tell me, what makes you different from all the others? Honestly, sir, I have no idea. You would have to ask Jackson. I am asking you. Natalie looked at Jackson, then back at Theodore. Something in the old man's gaze made her want to tell the truth, or as close to it as she dared. Maybe because I see him, not just what he has built or what he represents. Jackson could be broke tomorrow, and he would still be the smartest, kindest, most interesting person I have ever met. Theodore smiled. Good answer? Too good, perhaps. But I like you, Natalie Brooks. You have fire. My grandson needs someone with fire. As the evening wore on, Natalie found herself relaxing, almost enjoying herself, until she noticed a man watching them from across the room. He was perhaps 40, handsome in a calculated way, and something about his attention made her uneasy. Jackson, she whispered. Who is that man? The one in the gray suit by the bar? Jackson followed her gaze and his jaw tightened. That is Derek Hammond. He runs a competing tech firm. We have history. Bad history. The worst kind. Business. Derek approached as if summoned by their attention. Jackson. Wonderful party. And who is this lovely woman? My fiancée, Natalie Brooks. Fiancée. Derek's smile widened. How sudden. I do not remember hearing about any relationship. We have been keeping it private, Jackson said tersely. Of course. Blaise, Derek turned to Natalie. You must be very special to capture Jackson's heart. He is usually so focused on business. Tell me, how did you two meet? They launched into their rehearsed story, but Natalie could feel Derek's skepticism. He asked pointed questions, digging for inconsistencies, watching their faces for tells. Fascinating, he said when they finished. A real romance. Though I have to say, Jackson, this seems rather convenient timing. Right when that merger with Pacific Systems is being finalized? The one where family stability was such a concern for their board? Jackson's hand tightened on Natalie's waist. The timing is coincidental, is it? Derek pulled out his phone, pulling up something before showing it to them. It was a photo of Jackson entering a talent agency 2 weeks ago. Funny. This is a place that specializes in providing actors for various events. Corporate parties, family gatherings, that sort of thing. Natalie felt her stomach drop. The room suddenly seemed too hot, too bright, too full of people who were starting to turn their attention toward the confrontation. Are you suggesting something, Derek? Jackson's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm just wondering if your fiancée is what she seems, or if she is a very talented actress playing a role. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Natalie felt hundreds of eyes turning toward them, saw Margaret Pierce moving closer with alarm on her face, saw Clarissa watching with barely concealed glee. This was the moment everything could fall apart. The moment when Natalie should have stayed silent. Let Jackson handle it. Stick to the script they had planned. Instead, she did something neither of them expected. She laughed. You know what? Natalie said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. You are absolutely right. Breaking the script, the silence that followed Natalie's words was absolute. Even the string quartet seemed to pause mid-note. Jackson's face went pale, then red, his hand dropping from her waist as if burned.
Natalie,
he said, his voice strained with warning. What are you doing? I am done lying, she said, and her voice carried across the gallery. People were definitely watching now, sensing drama more entertaining than any scheduled entertainment. You are right, Mr. Hammond. I am an actress. Jackson hired me to pretend to be his fiancée for tonight. Derek looked triumphant. Margaret Pierce looked faint. Clarissa smiled like Christmas had come early. And Jackson looked at Natalie like she had just detonated a bomb at his feet. There was a contract, Natalie continued, her actress training keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. $40,000 to play a role for one night. To smile and laugh and tell a believable story about falling in love. To convince all of you that Jackson Pierce had finally found someone? How could you? Margaret's voice cut through the shocked murmurs. How dare you embarrass this family? I am not finished, Natalie said, turning to face the crowd that had gathered. Her hands were shaking. Booch forced herself to continue. Jackson hired me because he was desperate. Because every woman in his social circle wanted him for his money or his connections. Because his family pressured him constantly to settle down. Because he just wanted one night where people would stop judging him for being alone. She turned back to Jackson, whose expression was unreadable. And yes, it started as a transaction. I needed the money. My theater company folded. I was 3 months behind on rent, and $40,000 seemed like a fortune. So I said yes to something I knew was wrong. And why are you confessing? Derek demanded. Feeling guilty? No, Natalie said softly, looking directly at Jackson. Because somewhere between signing that contract and tonight, something happened that was not in the agreement. I stopped acting. The gallery erupted in whispers. Jackson stared at her, his face a mask of confusion, and something else, something that looked like hope. When we danced in his apartment, practicing for tonight, I was not pretending. When he told me about his father and I held his hand, that was real. When he made me laugh while we created our fake history, I was not acting. Natalie's voice broke slightly. And when I looked at him tonight, with all of you watching, I realized that I had done the stupidest, most unprofessional thing an actress can do. I fell in love with my scene partner. Margaret pressed a hand to her chest. Theodore wheeled closer, his eyes bright with interest. Jackson took a step toward Natalie, then stopped. You do not mean that, he said roughly. You are just trying to salvage the situation. Oh, I am done salvaging situations. I am done with scripts and rehearsed lines and carefully constructed lies. Natalie pulled off the beautiful diamond bracelet Jackson had given her to wear, pressing it into his hand. I am giving back everything you gave me. The jewelry, the dress, all of it. I will return the money too, though it will take me time. But I am keeping one thing. What? The truth. That I met a man who was lonely and guarded, and so afraid of being hurt that he would rather hire a fake fiancé than risk real connection. And somehow, despite the lies we told everyone else, we were honest with each other. Tears spilled down her cheeks now, ruining her carefully applied makeup. I fell in love with the man who made bad jokes about modern art, who donated anonymously to arts programs, who listened to my dreams like they mattered. Not the billionaire. Not the Pierce heir. Just Jackson. She turned to leave, needing to escape before she completely fell apart in front of 300 people. But Jackson's hand caught her wrist, spinning her back around. Wait, he said, and his voice was raw with emotion. Just wait. The real confession Jackson stood frozen, holding Natalie's wrist while his entire world realigned itself. Everyone was staring, waiting for his response. His mother looked horrified. Derek looked satisfied. Clarissa watched with cruel amusement. But Theodore, his grandfather, was smiling. Let her go, Jackson, Margaret hissed. You have been humiliated enough. No, Jackson said, still looking at Natalie. No, I have not been honest enough. He released her wrist, but only to take both her hands in his. Standing in the center of the gallery with everyone watching their private moment become painfully public. You want the truth? He said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Here it is. I did hire Natalie. I wrote a contract like she was a business acquisition. I thought I could pay for companionship without risking anything real. And I was wrong. Margaret tried to interrupt, but Theodore raised his hand, silencing her. Let the boy speak. I was wrong, Jackson continued, his eyes never leaving Natalie's face. Because you cannot contract real connection. You cannot schedule falling in love. And somewhere between our first coffee and tonight, I stopped thinking about you as an employee and started thinking about you every moment we were apart. Natalie's breath hitched. Jackson, when we danced, I was not practicing. I was holding the only woman who ever made me want to dance. When you met my mother and stood your ground, I was not proud of how well you were acting. I was proud to be standing next to you. His voice grew stronger, and when Derek tried to expose our arrangement, I was not worried about my reputation or my business deal. I was terrified of losing you. But the contract, Natalie whispered, means nothing. It never did. Jackson reached up to cup her face. I love you, Natalie Brooks. Not because I paid you to be here. Not because you played a role perfectly. But because you saw past all of this, he gestured at the opulent surroundings and made me remember who I actually am underneath it all. The gallery was silent. Then, from the back, someone started clapping. Theodore wheeling himself forward, applauding slowly but steadily. Others joined uncertainly at first, then with more enthusiasm, until half the room was applauding while the other half whispered furiously. "This is a disaster," Margaret said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "Hey, this is honest," Theodore corrected. "More honest than half the marriages in this room?" He looked at Jackson and Natalie. "You two made mistakes. You lied. But you also did something rare. You found something real in a world built on pretense." Derek Hammond shook his head, laughing without humor. "This is insane. You are throwing away your reputation over an actress you have known for 2 weeks. 3 weeks, Jackson corrected. "And yes, I would rather have 3 honest weeks with Natalie than 30 years of appropriate dinner parties with someone I do not love." He turned back to Natalie, ignoring everyone else. "I know I have no right to ask this. I know I started this all wrong, treated you like a business transaction, put you in an impossible position. But if you mean what you said, if any part of this became real for you too, then stay. Not because of a contract. Not as my fake fiancée, but as yourself, Natalie Brooks from Brooklyn, the brilliant actress who made me feel alive again." Natalie looked around at the watching faces. She saw judgment, curiosity, and in a few eyes, understanding. This was not how fairy tales were supposed to go. There was no neat resolution, no perfect ending. Just 2 flawed people standing in the wreckage of their elaborate lie, asking if they could build something true from the pieces. "I need to know something first." She said anything when we were creating our fake history. "You said the best lies are closest to truth. So tell me, if we had met at that art benefit, if there had been no contract, no money, no arrangement, would you have actually asked for my coffee?" Jackson smiled, really smiled, for the first time since Derek's accusation. "I would have asked you to dinner. And when you said no because you thought I was just another rich guy collecting phone numbers, I would have kept asking until you gave me a chance." "Why?" "Because even in a room full of people, you were the only one who seemed real." Natalie felt more tears fall, but this time they were different. She reached up to touch Jackson's face. This man who had hired her to lie, but somehow made her more honest than she had been in years. "I have conditions," she said, echoing her words from their first negotiation. "Name them." "No more contracts about relationships. No more scripts or rehearsed lines. If we do this, we do it messy and honest and real." "Agreed. I keep my apartment, my independence, my career. I am not becoming anyone's trophy fiancé, fake or real. I would never ask you to. And we tell the truth about everything. Starting with admitting to everyone here that we have no idea if this will work, but we are willing to try." Jackson looked around at the watching crowd. "You heard her. We are a disaster. We started with lies and barely know each other. This might crash and burn spectacularly, but I would rather try and fail than spend my life wondering what if." "Well said, my boy," Theodore called out. "Now kiss the girl before she changes her mind." And because some fairy tale traditions were worth keeping, Jackson did exactly that. He kissed Natalie in front of 300 witnesses, and this time there was no script, no performance, no pretense. Just 2 people who had found each other in the strangest way possible, choosing honesty over image, connection over expectation, love over convenience. When they finally broke apart, the gallery erupted in genuine applause. Even Margaret, though she still looked faint, managed a slight nod that might have been approval or resignation or both. Derek Hammond had disappeared, likely to find other scandals to exploit. Clarissa watched with an expression of grudging respect, and Theodore beamed like he had orchestrated the whole thing. "This is going to be all over social media by morning," Natalie said. "Probably. Your mother is never going to forgive me. She will come around. Or she will not. Either way, it is her choice. I really do have to return the money, Jackson. I cannot keep it now." "Actually," Theodore interrupted, wheeling up to them about that. "Young lady, how much does it cost to keep a small theater company running for a year?" Natalie blinked, confused by the change in subject. "I do not know. Maybe 60,000–70,000 with rent, production costs, salaries. Consider it funded." Theodore pulled out his phone with surprising dexterity for an 85-year-old. "I will have my attorney contact you Monday. The Pierce Foundation will provide a grant to reopen your theater company. On one condition. What condition? That you name it something other than Mission Arts Collective. That is terrible branding. He winked. And that you promise to keep making my grandson honest. He needs someone who is not afraid to call him on his nonsense.